So, like, I'd noticed a Spectator, I'd seen quite a few of their videos on YouTube, and I sort of was watching them, not a lot, but a little bit, and I noticed that it seemed to be quite an unbiased newspaper, but for me to say that it's an unbiased newspaper, in my opinion, is saying something, right? I thought it was quite impartial, particularly that their audience is what you would normally call the conservative audience, or the affluent sort of like, intellectual audience, not necessarily, aristocrats, but, people who might be, barristers, or, people with money, basically, or who have had education, right? Now, I made the assumption, the incorrect assumption, right, that this Andrew Neil guy, just like when I was watching because I didn't have time to, I'm not like a geek, right? I didn't research absolutely everything about everything, because you can't learn everything. You've only got so many hours in the day, right? I just watched a few of the videos, right? I got the feeling, or I got the impression that this Andrew Neil guy, just the way that he conveyed himself and how he was being put into videos, and sometimes when he was sat in certain backgrounds, the way he was sort of positioned and presented, it felt like that he actually was either one of the main editors of The Spectator or owned it, right? This Andrew Neil guy, and I just got a good feeling from him. I thought, like, this is a good guy, right? I just got these vibes that this is a good guy. Now, I know they've got Murray on there, and they've got various other people, and that Katie Balls and people like that. They seem to be, when I was watching the Katie Balls interviews and Douglas Murray, I don't follow Douglas Murray. I haven't subscribed to his channel. I don't listen to him currently at the moment. I saw some of his videos. People like that, to me, seemed like you could trust them, right? They're people you can trust. Now, I didn't really put much time or focus on The Spectator because I was doing other things, right, and following other stuff. But I did actually reply to some of them. I made some videos and tagged them in the videos, right? And obviously, it's quite an influential newspaper being like that. Now, I went away from that, and then I've started to... there's some important channels like Art of Law Media, Alan Robertshaw and Black Belt Barrister, and also this Steve Barrett Barrister now, because the barristers are meant to be the people who we pay to go into court, right, or who are meant to represent us and know about the law. Now, I don't always agree with Black Belt Barrister, and sometimes it's cringing to hear him say things that are wrong. But Alan Robertshaw on his Art and Media Law, I've spoken to Alan Robertshaw, right? I've telephoned him and spoke to him. I get on really well with him. I think he's a great guy. I think he's an amazing, fantastic guy. He teaches barristers, but he's just put a video out recently and some other videos in the past where he's just wrong. Right? He's actually incorrect. And it's something really important. It's not just something and nothing, right? That what he's incorrect on is the exact part of the law that plugs into this thing where we need to get urgent attention to now. And we need to get it recognised in the courts now. And we need to get some of these barristers to do something now about it. I've been putting together work, but now that it's not easy for me to travel, so I took my driving licence away, and I don't have much money spare, I'm having to sort of like put something together to do something myself, and it's so difficult to contact people. You would have thought that with this amazing technology, it's never been as easy to contact people, but that's actually not true. People are so kind of like in their own bubble world, and they're being successful themselves that you can't get their attention. And even when they actually go to their own channels and their own audience and they have live chats and stuff like that, they're just not there. They're kind of like in this daydream, kind of like, you got Steve Barrett. He's like, oh, my lovelies, my lovelies. Oh, we've got a very serious issue to talk about, my lovelies, now, and I'm going to tell you about it. And, you can ask some questions. But, it ended up being cash for questions. People who ended up firing money at him ended up getting their questions read out, and other people didn't. But it's going to be something serious about these Jews getting taken away, right? So you got really important stuff. And he's like, oh, DM me. Like, I tried to DM him. He's never replied, It feels like these people have got puppy dogs swarming all over them, licking them, the lovelies, and they're just talking to a hypothetical audience that they've got hundreds of thousands of viewers listening, and they just want to, like, you know, it's just extremely casual. Oh, you know, just fire a question. It's not that important. Well, yeah, it's important. You're saying that we need to stop these Jews getting taken away, and there are loads of people currently getting arrested and put in prison illegally. Like, you know, it's. I mean, you can't approach these channels and take it seriously because they're not taking it seriously, right? But actually, when you get to things like The Spectator and there's money involved and it's a newspaper, and now apparently Michael Gove has taken over the newspaper, and I didn't know that. He took over in 2024, right? It couldn't be more serious now. I think this whole Boris Johnson, Michael Gove, kind of like Rees-Mogg section of the Conservative Party, I think they spied that The Spectator was completely honest and totally impartial, and that could be a potential threat for the Conservative Party, particularly people like Rees-Mogg, who is completely and utterly corrupt, right? Well, all of the Tories and Johnson, particularly when we get into this area of social media law and questioning, is the social media lawful from the start? Now, I've just noticed, Gove took over quite a while back. Now, that, looking at the timing for it, it was around that time when I was tagging them and making comments and so forth. Now, I think that the, you know, big bad evil Tory party, mainly like, you know, Johnson and, you know, these people who are corrupt, they've had alarm bells ringing, because actually I think The Spectator was actually impartial. But now you see this Steve Barrett, he's actually writing for The Spectator. Now, I can't see Steve Barrett, even on his own channel. Now, I don't think Steve Barrett is himself like a liar. I don't think he's a bad person, but he needs filling in on certain information, and he just needs guiding and correcting on a few things, and we're not in the situation to do that to him currently in his current approach and mindset. It's just not possible with the communication. Maybe, you know, I'm not as competent as some other channels like Big Brother Watch, or, you know, like Resistance GB, or, you know, other people are getting all these interviews on Andrew Bridgen and so forth. I'm not schooled in the procedure of, you know, getting on these shows, and a lot of time you contact them and they don't reply. So these particular people, when they make contact with channels and get on there and get on the channel and get interviewed and get to speak, they're usually running on some kind of reputation or some kind of large following or something like that, or they've had some sort of training, right? Or they're just they just think it's irrelevant, but it's not irrelevant, right? So if Steve Barrett, I mean, he has just started talking about bringing legal action against some of these MPs, ministers and members of parliament. If he goes any further with that, I can see that I don't think Michael Gove will be too impressed with it being the editor of The Spectator. If Steve Barrett actually seriously starts to pursue this, I really think there will be alarm bells ringing with Michael Gove. And I think that's why he's ended up in charge of The Spectator anyway. But, I mean, I've not watched The Spectator for a while, but, I mean, when it was this Andrew Neil guy, you know, and Katie Balls and Murray and the other people around it, I actually just had a very, very good feeling about it. Now, I'm not saying that it doesn't have a good feeling about it anymore, because I've not been watching it, but the fact that Michael Gove is in charge of it now, and he's one of the most corrupt Conservative people that you could imaginally conceive of, right? We actually need to, it's people like Gove who have failed in Parliament to uphold our rights, okay? They failed when they're ministers, they failed when they're in government, so they're actually liable and actionable partly for some of the illegal actions that have happened to people who are protesting. Now, this is the thing, right? I'll switch away from Andrew Neil now, hold on a minute. Right, so this video here, right, this what is the crime of misconduct in public office? So Steve Barrett's taking this serious now. He's actually doing a video on what is misconduct in public office, right? So, and now we've got adverts interrupting. So I've got it on this Steve Barrett video here now. And I know my way of making videos is quite basic and crude, but I just like to start recording and start talking, right, and get it on the thing that's there. Look, right, at 1 minute 45, 1 minute 46 into this video, he's got the writing there. Back in the day, Parliament just raised taxes and levies, right? So Steve Barrett is saying here now, back in the day, Parliament just levied and raised taxes and levies. That is completely and totally wrong. He's wrong. He's so wrong. Right, and it's not just like, oh, come on, lovelies, let's have a chat about, whether we can take action against this MPs. It's not that important, let's keep it casual, right? This is serious. Parliament is not there to just raise taxes and levies. Okay, if you want the most detailed, thorough investigation into what Parliament originated from is with William Prynne in his brief calendar books, because he goes through the entire rolls to all the summons, and he meticulously goes through the records of Parliament because he wants to find it out, right, himself, and that's in the early 1620s and after, up till when he was an MP for Bath. Now, look, right, in the 1688 Bill of Rights, it absolutely, clearly and explicitly, importantly states that Parliament is there to settle and redress the grievances, right, of the nation and for amending and strengthening of the laws, which includes, changing, adjusting taxes and money, right? Now, when you can't read the 1688 Bill of Rights with a pinch of salt and with brain fog, that's what Parliament exists for. That's its purpose. Therefore, the right to petition is fundamentally critical to that, because we petition Parliament and it comes from the public. It's not just MPs, it's anyone who participates in the usage of Parliament, right? Now, the redress of grievances, right, for Parliament and the King, whether there was a Parliament or whether it was to the King and Council, depending on whether the Parliament was called or not, goes back to the observation of due process of law, 1368, right? Because that's where the community come together. If you check the Norman and French translator, not the Parliament's translation, right? The French Norman and Old French translation, get the translator out, specialist translator, not Google, right? It's where the community come and petition the King, right, to settle grievances, which were usually from the courts or from other persons, right, which hadn't been able to be settled. Now, if you want any further evidence that Parliament is there for that, and that is one of the main fundamental purposes of Parliament, you can read the Proceedings of the Short Parliament. It's a book. I've got it. I've actually got the book. You can read it for free online on the Internet Archive. You read the dialogue and discussions in that book, like actually from John Pym and other people. It's the Proceedings. It's actually got the Proceedings and dialogue, right? That supports that Parliament is there to redress grievances, right, and for amending and strengthening of the laws, right? It's one of the fundamental main parts of it, and it's ended up being pushed to the side, petitioning, and its importance reduced by Parliament in modern format, but still there, and they're trying to eradicate it. They switched some of the functions to the Parliamentary and Health Service Ombudsman, right, and they're also illegally censoring the usage of it at the moment. And further to that, they've got a policy on the e-petitions, which is in complete contradiction to the standing orders, right? So there's something very illegal going on with it. It's there for that. And then we've got all the rights with that, which are the rights we're arguing about and wanting to get proved when people are getting arrested illegally, right? And that's been absolutely... it's been put... No one's done it. No one's succeeded because they've undermined that right and they've been ignoring it. It started at least before 1985 with the formation of the CPS and has got worse. And now it should have been done when I started going into court to try and get it sorted out, 2019, and no one has yet. No one's proved it. Well, it doesn't need to be proved because it's a law. But what I'm saying is no one has corrected the government on it yet from when they've deviated and gone wrong on it, right? And there's nothing in law that's preventing it. It's a principle, right? So there's like, loads of people like Roger Hallam. In fact, when I was scrolling through the Spectator's videos, there was one about Roger Hallam in there and, just a Poyle. There are some very simple words that these newspapers could say and some very simple things they could put into the discussions and raise in their programmes, but they're not doing, like petition of leave of court and the 1980 resolution, like the right to present petitions at the Bar of Parliament without an MP endorsing it, the 1944 special report with John Tinker MP, and this, why is Parliament there? Now, when we've got Steve Barrett, and I'm not saying he's doing this maliciously, I don't think he's doing this like maliciously or, evil, but he's just wrong. He's not properly informed. And he doesn't know, or he's just in daydream land, right? And it's actually quite harmful. When you've got a channel with 100,000, just short of 100,000 people on, 90,000, 100,000, and when you put a video up and it instantly gets 11,000 views, right? You can't just go casually, and I'm not being condescending now, you can't just go on there all lovey-dovey with your lovelies, all over you, kind of petting and licking you, and just go, okay, we'll put the country to rights now, we'll sort it all out, don't worry, we'll do it together, right? But they're not really doing it together because they're not listening to you, right, properly. And then he's got all Parliament's just there to levy taxes, right? It's not. It's there to settle grievances, right? Primarily, first and foremost, in the Bill of Rights and in the proceedings of the 1640 short Parliament, right? Now, there I've got it. He's got misinformation there, right? He's a qualified barrister, right? Now, I've tried to messenger him, right? I think I fired an email and I've put comments in his video. I tried to get questions in his live chat. I did get talking to his assistant in the live chat, who was quite helpful. And I put some really important information, right? But he's just, he's not, I mean, I've been like this before in the past, and I've realised it's a real problem. I mean, it's, like, this is not nasty at all. I'm not being nasty, but this is hypothetical. This is like, this is just like, he needs a slap around the face, right? He actually needs a hypothetical slap around the face, like, or some water thrown over him, or, just Steve, like, they've got an episode of Doctor Who in the new ones called Dot and Bubble, right? It's kind of like that, the Doctor and that Ruby Sunday girl are trying to get people's attention, right? And they're going into their Dot and Bubble world, and they're not quite getting it. That's where we are with this, right? That is actually where we are with this. Now, I've just put in the comments here under his video the correction, right? And also, I will note another thing, and this is just a side note to it, right? This is like a little side note to it, right? Steve, he was in the chat the other night, and he was like, oh, someone's been nasty. Oh, no, look. And he's wanting to get his assistant to remove them, like, so they've been nasty, right? Because he wants his, like... He actually he pretty much dissed his YouTubers, his 90,000 YouTubers. He pretty much dissed them and then just said that, he prefers his lovelies on Substack, right? So that was an insult to start with. When, where's he getting all his views from? His 6,000 Substack thing. He said that he wanted to make a career out of it. I'm sure he's getting more from his 100,000 YouTube viewers than 6,000 Substack. But anyway, that was a slap around the face for us, right? Look, right, I've taken the direct quote and exact words from the 1640 short Parliament, right? And I put them in his comments. And it states that even the meanest of people should be allowed to participate in the parliaments, right? Even the meanest of people, right? And that is a political statement, right? That is a political statement from the short Parliament, from John Pym. Now, that means that, when David Cameron is trying to take away people's right to vote if they're in prison and stuff like that, even the meanest of people can participate in government. David Cameron doesn't believe that mean people can. Now, I know where Steve Barrett's coming from. He's a barrister, he's got affluent circles, it's all kind of like airs and graces, when you go into a court, which is not the most nicest of places to go into, that he's like smiling and waving at other barristers, he knows judges and are polite to barristers, they're all on this different wavelength to the accused and all this sort of thing, right? I know that he's got his lovelies, right? Just like when you're going to, like, Starbucks in the middle of London, and you've got a lovely topping on your, cappuccino, right? Sit down in the comfy chair with your big whippy top cappuccino topping, right? But, right, we're not being mean, right? When this is a professional and people actually believe him and go away from it, believing what he said, and then speak to other people and spread that around, right? So you've got to get it right. And he's claiming that, we're looking at potentially taking action against MPs, and we're wanting to save the juries, which the juries, they're trying to take them out now, and we need to urgently act. And I was trying to tell him about Brian Leveson because, there's some... there's a case for Brian Leveson's evidence not being admissible because previously he was a judge and his material goes towards votes and proceedings, right? And he's not meant to for committees because it says that in the 2005 Act. It's why the law lords can't vote in Parliament, right? Because it's votes and proceedings. Now, Leveson, I think that he contributed illegally. He contributed illegally previously, so I don't think he's in a fit position to contribute his evidence now. And he's in charge of investigatory powers. He gives out investigatory powers to the police who use them, who work with the CPS and prosecute people. So that's aside. He's helping and assisting and aiding the prosecution in these cases when they're saying whether or not we should take juries out. He's not independent. In fact, if the CPS wanted to win and they think they could win a lot easier without the juries and that was an ulterior motive, then and Leveson's helping them by giving them investigatory powers, then he's completely and totally, absolutely not independent, right? And he's previously given evidence illegally. So Leveson is part of the key to the juries. In fact, one of the major keys to the juries. And we could get onto the fact of Magna Carta and all that as well, and the fact that they're already hanging on the skin of their teeth from what's been removed in the past, from the civil courts and the high courts. And, they're saying, we're just going to remove them down a little bit more, but they're already on the skin of their teeth. So there's a lot to say for that. But anyway, this misinformation needs correcting. Why? Because by Steve Barrett saying that, or leading people to believe, even casually, that Parliament was only there for taxes or levying monies, right? He's actually not giving evidence stating, confirming and admitting or educating people that it is there primarily also for redress of grievances, which rights you use are those rights which currently are being ignored by the courts and completely illegally. And there's some connections to Michael Gove for that, who's in charge of The Spectator, and Barrett is apparently writing for The Spectator, right? Now, I'm not saying that he purposely said that because of Michael Gove, because he's talking about getting some action against MPs now, right? But this is why when you can't hire these barristers and use them in court and pay them to represent you if you're a political cause or campaign, because they clearly don't get it, right? They don't understand it. And we need to educate them about the petition of leave for court and the right to use the bar of Parliament and the rest of it. And if Barrett does not... He said that he's been into the House of Commons on a number of occasions recently. He said that he's got a friend who's a high-profile lord and one of the most hardest-working lords. Several members of the House of Lords that he knows, right? He can't be a practicing barrister, in my opinion, and have a channel with 100,000 viewers nearly, or just short of, right? And be saying that not strongly and passionately, clearly advocating to the public and informing them that Parliament is one of the purposes of Parliament is there to redress grievances, causes and matters, right? Causes and matters, as through the observation of due process of law, right? So he doesn't get it. If you don't know that Parliament primarily is there for the usage not only of people who are elected to go in there and be the representatives, but where do they get the casework from? The people, right? You don't get Parliament at all. And if you can't understand that, you won't understand the importance of the rights and how they're currently being violated by the courts, right? Now, I've emailed the Spectator now to one of the editors to see if they can do something about it, right? But this is the thing. Alan Robertshaw, we'll go into Alan Robertshaw now, right? Now, here's the Alan Robertshaw video. He's talking about juries as well. They're all talking about the removal of the juries, and they're all opposed to it. That's great. They're on our side for protecting juries and trying to stop them removing juries, right? They're on our side for it. But I'm going to click on this and an advert will open, so I'm probably going to have to pause it and get rid of the advert. Now, here's Robertshaw, right? And we've still got more adverts. Can't get rid of these adverts, right? Now we've got an angry man video under here and a furious wife. Anyway, I'm getting distracted. Here's Alan Robertshaw, right? Now, Alan Robertshaw is a fantastic person, right? He's a really nice guy, a really lovely guy, right? I spoke to him on the phone. We've talked about law on the phone, right? I like him, but, you know, he doesn't always answer because he's busy, right? And I don't want to, don't ring him loads, but I know I've spoke to him a few times, so I've got in touch with him and I've spoke to him about Bill of Rights and things like that. But still, it goes over the top of his head. He's like, you tell him some really important, critically serious things, right, which need to be known by barristers and, you know, other barristers know about it. And he's kind of a little bit just like, doo. He hears me say it, and he doesn't say that I'm wrong, you know, but he's just like, and, you know, great and all right, you know, like, he's not like, you know, he's not running up the fire, you know, he's not running down the fire escape or sliding down the fire pole and going to other barristers or making a video on it, or, you know, he might have started reading a little bit about it, but this is a thing, right? Now, let me try and, hold on a second. So we've got the words on now. So now he's talking about the William Penn trial, okay? So we're talking about the William Penn trial now. So he knows about the William Penn trial, right? He knows about it. He's read about it, but I don't know where he's read about it.
In accordance with their conscience. They cannot be forced to convict somebody. Sorry, try to get the framing right. It's quite much rock that. So let me take you back to 1670. A couple of guys called Penn and Mead. They were Quakers. Penn's the guy who actually disappeared off in the end to establish Pennsylvania in the United States. But they were Quakers, and they were preaching in Grace Church Street in London. Now, at the time, there was a sort of public order law that prohibited gatherings of more than 5 people.
Right. I'm pausing it now. So, this is wrong, right? He's just saying, it's just a public order. There was a public order. No, it's a tumultuous petitioning act, right? It's actually it's not just a public order law, right? Like, seditious meetings or things like that. We have the Public Order Acts, right? But the 1661 Tumultuous Petitioning Act is a really, really important act for petitioning, right? Because when the suffragettes were were active, right? There was a lot of argument between that law and the 1688 Bill of Rights, okay? Because a lot of people believed it was an implied repeal. Even though it hadn't been repealed. Herbert Broom talks about it in his book, and he basically gives you the briefing, or as much briefing as you're going to get about it, about what the current belief of the legal profession was about it at the time, in the mid to late 1800s, right? So that's very good information. But this is not just a public order law, right? This is quite important because even though it did not give the courts the legal right to determine the causes of Parliament, it didn't give them the legal right to make a legal determination about the cause itself, which was the case when they give the courts the legal right to hear election petitions. They could make a determination on the election, which was previously only privileged to Parliament could make a determination on it. So they can't make a determination on, you know, your claim, right? But it was about bringing your claim. It was only a restriction, and this is what he says. Now, they could, because of the observation of due process of law, and because they can't stop you from doing something which is your right to do it, they just put a prohibition on it, right? Now, so they couldn't actually stop people from doing it. So this is why they've got 20 people. So under 20 people, and there is no prohibition at all. You're getting permission and consent, or you're actually getting a recording. They're wanting you to declare and make it official so they know what you're doing in order to go large with political actions. But once you go large and you've got consent, then it's the same as if it's 20 people, right? Like you've got a court order, but it could have been a jury. It wasn't necessarily justices. That was just in order to go large, right? And that didn't affect presenting them or handing them in. It didn't give them a right to make a determination on your cause or case, right? But if you didn't go through the courts, it's basically registering. I think that they wanted just to know who's doing, to keep track of who's doing what, right? You know, so later on, people just didn't make it up that they were following a cause or, you know, whatever. so they knew what causes they were, which were likely to be large, right? So it's more like keeping track of it all. Now, that act was repealed in 1986. And there's never been such a law since. And in 1705, they made a resolution that Parliament can't create any new privileges. So the courts have never been able to make determinations on the actual cause itself. When you're in court, you're usually claiming that you've got a cause and it's under Parliament jurisdiction, right? And there's no limit or cap on it now, even in the Public Order Acts. And this is the main misconception about it. Now, but what is Robert Shaw doing wrong here? He says it's 5 people. It's not 5 people. Now, there are some other acts, like the Sedition Acts and various other acts, which were extremely temporary, but he's not talking about those. He's talking about the William Penn and William Mead trial in 1670, and that's the Tumultuous Petitioning Act. I've even got the full proceedings in a proper, like, it's a really nice kind of like 4-page kind of like full proceedings with all the dialogue in it and absolutely everything. Tells you all the information. It's like the court record of it, right? And they call it a tumult, right? It's a tumultuous assembly. So it's the 1661 Act. It's 20 people. Now, I was the person who got that act put on the website. And the reason I got that put on the website is so that people could find out about it and know about it, right? And check it. Now, you would have thought that Robert Shaw, I think I've mentioned that act to Robert Shaw on the phone even. You would have thought that Robert Shaw might have actually researched and looked at the act, seeing that I'd gone to all the trouble of getting it on the government legislation website, right? So I complained in the comments underneath his video that, you know, maybe he should correct it, right? Or correct this. You see this, like, the wording that goes on there. I said, well, even if you don't re-upload the video, can you correct the wording, like in the script, in the subtitles? And I even emailed him, and I also rang Black Belt Barrister, his friend, who's got the other channel who he works with, and I left an answering machine message, but didn't seem like they've bothered to change it, right? Now, I actually feel quite strongly about this, right? Because this is actually giving misinformation, and I know it's not his area of law, but he's a qualified barrister. It's a legal channel. And like Steve Barrett, then they're pumping out misinformation. And I've realised now this is their level of knowledge on this, right? And they don't actually know. They don't know it. They don't know about it properly. And so who does? Well, this is the thing. Even you've got these parliamentary agents who specialise in parliament law, right? But when you ring them up as a member of the public, they're always very surprised. They don't know why a member of the public's ringing them up, because other big businesses and companies ring them up who want to get a private bill put through, because they're only really dealing in private bills, right? They're on these A and B rolls, or they were on these A and B rolls, because the clerks of parliament used to do it before they did, but then it was like not impartial, so they replaced it with these parliamentary agents. Now, this is the thing. The parliamentary agents do not really know about things like the Parliamentary Papers Act 1840 and copyrights. They don't really seem to know about us, the protesters, and processing rights. They only are really been training in private bills. Now, who else knows about this? Well, who else? Well, historians do know some about it, but the thing with historians, like, you got Professor Jason Pesey, right? He should really know. And then you've got Professor Karen Bowie at Glasgow University. And then you've got like Dr. Brodie Waddle, right, who's teaching. Now, I've contacted with them and they've sort of replied minimally, but they're just far too busy and they're more interested in their students being taught and not other people who have got urgent, critical national emergencies, and they're the professionals that we might talk with. It's part of this new woke government and woke university thing where they're discouraged from interacting with members of the public. They're discouraged from it, almost kind of like it's very hard for us to get on ProQuest unless you go all the way to Kew Gardens, even in the lockdown, right, and things like that. It's very hard. In fact, I think Tony Blair's freedom of information, that any information that's worth having or worth getting, you've got to pay to get it, or you can't get there, or it's hard to get there, or you've got to pay a lot of money to get there. They're not just going to hand it over for free or without an argument or dispute over. Even under reasonable adjustments when you're not well, right? Because I've been trying. I must admit, I've done well, right? I have managed to get quite a large. I've got quite a few PDF documents, right, for free, and I've got them given to me by like volunteers and things like that. But once the management sort of like got on top of it, they put a stop to it. But I did at the time. I managed to get what I needed, right? And there's just some other. I'm on with it now, but it's costing me £300 to get what I need to get, and it might even cost more. But there's going to be a procedure from getting that certificate from the Speaker of Parliament, so people can copy stuff and distribute it. And like I'm using a guy called Archive Mole, and he dare not copy anything and get into trouble. And I'm like, well, you can't get into trouble, and that's what that certificate is there for. Because he's a for-profit third party, right, acting on my behalf, so that would protect him. But I've tried to get him from Speaker Lindsay, and he won't give out the certificate. In fact, they've never given out a certificate. I haven't found one. I don't think they've ever. They made the act, and they've never issued a certificate from what I can find. So that's quite interesting, because they just ended up merging it into the common law, and they started using the act, and they didn't bother getting the certificates, right? But I'm way off topic now. Let's go back to Alan Robert Shaw, right? Now, I don't want to fall out with Alan, because he's a great guy. I like Alan Robert Shaw, right? But he wants to... Alan Robert Shaw wants to stop the government taking juries away. He wants to, right? And I want to help him, all right? And same with Steve Barrett. And Steve Barrett now also wants to get legal action against some ministers and members of parliament. I don't know what Michael Gove will be doing as the editor in charge of The Spectator now. I don't know whether he'll be running around with his tie on fire or what. If Steve Barrett starts telling people how to bring legal proceedings about, ministers, because Michael Gove, it'll be like a fucking fire station, be like steam coming out of the smoke coming out of the fucking windows. Like Michael Gove will be like sliding down the metal pole, like he'll be running out with his fire hat on, plugging the connector into the pavement thing and spraying water on the building. Michael Gove, his hair will be on fire. Oh, Steve Barrett's one of our writers is going to bring legal proceedings against me. I'm in charge of the newspaper, right? This is the thing. Now, this is the thing. Should Alan Robert Shaw's video be taken down by YouTube? Because, I've had my channel taken down for less and lost 10 years worth of work, my entire life, right? Just for an error in upload, So, should Art of Law be getting a strike and getting that video taken down? Will that be the metaphorical slap around the face or throwing a bucket of water over him to go, to wake up out of it? And same with Steve Barrett with his misinformation. Now, I know that he's not being evil or misleading on purpose, but when you try all you can to honestly and caringly communicate with these people and try and get their attention, right, it's not working, right? And it's getting to that point where, look, are we going to work together to stop them removing the juries or not? Yes or no? And are we going to try and get some correct information out about these rights so people can learn about them properly and not be misled? Yes or no? And they're not helping to do that. They're actually helping to mislead, right, by error. Now, either they need a slap around the face or throwing water over them. And that's not being nasty. It's not like, Steve Barrett always been nasty in the chat. It's not about that. We can't all be like puppy dogs, and this is the thing. Alan Robert Shaw has these big soft toy teddy bears, these big puppy teddy bears and stuff like that. Like Steve Barrett with his lovelies. They're all these big softy barristers, It's like, they come in from work and they've got, Labradors chasing after them and licking them all over. These, my lovelies are here, But this is the thing. When you go to court with some of these people, you might be criminally prosecuted or you might be getting divorced, and it's not lovely to have serious legal proceedings against you, right? Now, I understand their world, right? I understand the world that these people live in. Alan Robert Shaw went to the Isle of Man and he got wined and dined, training barristers on a course, and all these high-profile judges, inviting him around for parties and all this stuff. I'm not knocking that, right? I'm not knocking that, and they have all these talks and conversations about law and knock things around between each other. I'm not knocking that, right? But how can you get these people to listen, right? How can you get them to listen? They're wanting us to listen to them, right? They're wanting us to listen to them. But, I mean, it's like that Dot and Bubble programme. And in that Dot and Bubble programme, in the meanwhile, while it's all going on, there's these slug creatures which are, like devouring people. And while this is going on now with these, Lovelace barristers, there are people getting illegally prosecuted, getting put in prison for long amounts of time, right? And they're not actually helping. Now, if they were actually helping and saying all they need to do is, why aren't they telling? They need to tell people about petition for leave of court and what it is, and they need to read about it properly. But can we trust them to do that? Even if after I've told them that it exists and that they didn't know about it, If Alan Robert Shaw is going away, doing a little bit of, Googling about a William Penn, but where's he got his 5 people from, right? Not the Act which was being used in 1670, because they hadn't got the Seditious Meeting Acts at that point, as far as I know. They were the early 1700s. From what I've read, and he definitely meant the act, which he meant the tumult. It was classed as a tumultuous assembly. It's 20 people, right? That's what it is. So it's like, I mean, do I say things that are wrong in videos? But this is the thing, right? I am not a qualified barrister. I am not practicing as a barrister, and people don't trust me as a barrister. I also don't have, hundreds of thousands of people following my channel who are actually getting primed with this information and taking it actually to be the truth. So this is the thing. So ultimately, and this is what we need to do. This is what I've been trying to do, and even stop the ULEZ. I was allowed to help stop the ULEZ, right? And I submitted all this information and contacted the solicitors, barristers, lawyers, and they had live cases. So it was before the case. So I gave the information over, and I tried to explain it to them. Like, we got Sandeep Pankara, and then that Peter Gotch. One letter short of gotcha. If you put an A on the end, it's gotcha. I think we did get a good outcome with that, but it wasn't the correct outcome because it didn't prove it for other people, right? it was only the CPS backing down. They didn't actually openly, honestly admit the full truth of the law. And then we got like this Debbie Rodaway woman who was useless, although, but she, her client, he thought she was brilliant, but she wasn't brilliant. And they even persuaded him and scared him to confess, and that's deterring petitioners, right? And also, then the police, when they dropped the previous case, the police came in and retaliated with revenge and came after 8 of them, and actually have brought more charges to threaten 8 of them and scare them. And you're not allowed to deter petitioners, so they were scared They were scared of speaking to their other petitioners, right? So we've got the police acting as that's terrorism, and that's actually misconduct against petitioners, and that's clearly in the Erskine May book. Now, I don't think Steve Barrett has ever seen that page or looked at it. You've got to get the Parliament books, right? You've got to get the Parliament books, Erskine May, John Hatzel, William Prynne, and you've got to read them and study them. And even then, they're not giving the information over overly freely. They're giving the correct information over and being honest, but they're not being overly obvious and blatant beyond a certain extent. But how more obvious do you want than the Bill of Rights? Now, this is the thing with like Silky Carlo. I've sent material to Silky Carlo before, right? And Silky Carlo, she's kind of like of the similar opinion to Fiona Rose Diamond. Like, they believe that the 1688 Bill of Rights is very obvious, and they don't want to go into the technical side of it. They don't want to go into the technical law. They don't think you should have to, and they don't want to. But yet, Fiona Rose Diamond, when she's out in Newcastle and she gets approached by police, she instantly springs into action and goes right into the law. She goes right into the detailed law and legislation of the acts, but the modern ones, right? So she will go into the, when the pressure's on her, she will go into it, but she won't talk about it on her channel openly. And the thing with Big Brother Watch as well, Big Brother Watch don't go into great detail about complicated things with their campaign. They started doing some stuff when they were interviewing undercover police and, things like that. They started getting into quite serious technical stuff then. But Big Brother Watch puts a very simple, basic message, hoping that people can, they're using this kind of it's like simple marketing strategy where they just hammer the message repeatedly as simply as possible, but they've got to keep doing it. So they'll repost the same videos over and over again, and they'll do a similar variation of it, or keep it simple, but keep it coming again, and it relentless. Now, some people get bored of that. If you've been following their channel for a long time, you might get bored of the same videos being repeated over and over and over and over and over again. It's like, reading the news or something. Or it's like not reading the news, like reading the weather report, or, something meticulously tedious, over and over again, the same thing. It doesn't seem to bore them, right? It doesn't bore them hammering out the very same, videos, repeatedly posting them, reposting them. Once you become aware of their campaign and start following it, and you've learned those, that there's not really much additional new stuff except when there's new developments with the government and what the government are doing, right? Or if they launch a new campaign or thing to sign. So it's not really expanding on the knowledge and education. Now, I do think that clearly Big Brother Watch know that if you try to get too complicated and technical, you can't get people's attention, right? You got to keep it simple. But that's going on the basis that people believe what you're saying and that it's correct, right? But this is why it's important for these barristers, because people believe the barristers and what they're saying. But the barristers are meant to be the ones who know the technical, professional information and the deep technical aspects of it, but clearly they don't here. They're wrong and in error. So it just needs a little bit of guidance and correction, which is what I'm actually doing now. And I think these barristers, like Steve Barrett and Alan Robertshaw, it's only minimal correction and a little bit of help, but they don't seem too open to it. at the moment. And even when you make that connection, like manage to get speaking to them on the phone, even, I don't know if it sinks in or not. It's still like dot and bubble, like the doctor in that Ruby Sunday, whatever she's called, managed to get into the dot and bubble. Like that's me managing to get connected to Alan Roberts show. I'm on the phone with him, I'm talking with him, right? That's great, but it's still not kind of sinking in or being importance or relevance, right? When we've got critical emergencies going on, like that slug's eating someone at the side of them in that TV show, right? Like we've got people getting arrested illegally, so. It clearly the BBC based that programme on a real principle that's in effect, that this kind of difficulty to get through to people. And maybe if I'd been a little bit more bold and, jumping in front of the camera, maybe I might have got through to channels and, got invited on or got on Zoom or whatever. I'm not opposed to going on Zoom and answering questions, but, I have actually been on Zoom with a lawyer in America before, and it went quite well. But, I'd be more like, kind of go on Zoom and just talk, can it just be like kind of like a radio interview type thing? I'm up for answering questions. I've got in touch with Resistance GB now and that Emma Dunwell, and I managed to contact her, but still she's like, oh, I'm really busy, blah, blah, blah. It's like if she understands it and goes away from it with what I sent her and realises the importance of it, then that's good. But, they've got Andrew Bridgen on there at the moment. They've got Bridgen on there. He was an MP. MPs walked out when he was speaking. It still got put in Hansard. They couldn't stop it from getting put in Hansard, but no one wanted to kind of listen to Bridgen. They all walked out. But you're going on to the Michael Gove issue now. And Gove is now in charge of The Spectator, who Steve Barrett apparently writes for. So, I'm starting to complain to The Spectator now. So here we've got The Spectator, right? Here we have got The Spectator, right? And this is Michael Gove. And I don't know what happened then. I'll say this in this video. I did not miss the button then to turn the sound on. And what Neil Mohan is doing, Neil Mohan is malicious. He's malicious, and he's put an invisible screen over the video, so no matter how precise you are by pressing that volume sound button to turn the sound on, right, it's going to open a fucking advert, right, first press. And that is malicious, right? That means that no matter you believe he's trying to make you think that you missed the volume button, the sound button, and I didn't miss it. I didn't miss the sound button.
Recently published a book, Bad Education, about the corruption, intellectual and moral, that's afflicting our universities, but he's perhaps best known to spectators.
So can you believe this? Now Gove is even talking about corruption. Absolutely scandalous, right? Gove is talking about corruptions in universities, but he's a minister of government and not being protected and defending our rights. The rights that Steve Barrett, who writes for his newspaper, is getting wrong. And, I did not miss that button then on the volume. I hit it bang on. So he's got like so basically Neil Mohan's got it now. So like wherever you press the screen, an advert's going to pop up, right? No matter what, when you touch it, even if you press the volume, but he's presenting it and making it look like, oh, there are things that you can press here to do functions like turn the volume off. That's like, being on a plane and, when if the plane is going to crash and it's an emergency, you press the button to release the parachute and the air mask drops down, but it doesn't. Instead, like on the screen, an advert plays and it says, "Hi there, this is Neil Mohan from YouTube. I heard that the plane's experiencing difficulties." Oh, that's a shame, isn't it? Well, in 10 seconds after you've watched my new advert for Ferrari, then you will be able to press the button and have the air the oxygen mask will drop down and you will get your parachute after you watch this advertisement. Sorry for the inconvenience. Bye-bye. But you did press the button properly. And this is the pure evil of these platforms, But anyway, so I think I'm going to end it there because we've got I didn't know Gove was in charge of the Spectator.
The corruption, intellectual and...
Gove's talking about corruption. Unbelievable, this man. Michael Gove, a corrupt Tory, talking about corruption. Unbelievable. Is he going to be excused from Steve Barrett's legal action if he ever brings one against misconduct in office? Are they going to dodge Boris Johnson for misconduct in office? When he's had a newspaper column, which was entertainment, being provided to the public, at the expense... Well, actually, because you bought the newspaper wasn't provided for free. You actually paid for the newspaper, right? But I would say that it's not a treat, but it's still entertainment, and it's not the candidate being presented at the expense of someone else, right? A third party, because you're getting paid for it. Like on YouTube, it was free. YouTube was free, so that was a treat and a gift, right? But there could have been some expenses which helped boost and promoted Johnson's entertainment stories in that newspaper, which didn't fall under when the public actually pay for the newspaper. What do you actually pay for when you pay for the newspaper, and what does it cover? Obviously, it pays the wages for Johnson, right? I still think that I still think there's got to be some claim for Johnson influencing people from that newspaper. But anyway, I'll leave it there because I've kind of run out of steam now. So, but anyway, what was the point in this video? The point in this video is this, right? There's some professional barristers out there. They've started to get onto this topic of misconduct in office, and they started to go on touching on things to do with these rights that we're using, but they're getting it wrong, some of the information. And it's clear that they actually don't know a lot of it. And we need to try and get them to know it and to correct themselves. And until then, we've got problems. And the more videos they put out when they're wrong, it's misinformation and they're misleading people. So I guess that's the point.